Hello, AP World History students, and welcome to Chapter 36, Part 5. Today we're going to talk about the war in the Pacific and the end of the World War II. So remember, the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7th, 1945. This attack is what led the U.S. to enter the war, and they entered the war very quickly after that, as you can recall. And within 6 months, they were ready for their first major battle of the Pacific. So the U.S. had broken Japanese code. They knew where Japanese ships were located, and they launched the Battle of Midway in June of 1942. Now, this wasn't a particularly bloody battle compared to some other ones, although there were still a significant number of deaths and loss of ships. Over 3,000 Japanese soldiers died, and just over 300 American soldiers died in this battle. It occurred from June 4th to June 7th, so it was a pretty short battle, but it was a turning point for the U.S. in the Pacific. The U.S. then began a strategy of island hopping. Basically, what this means is they attacked or took over military bases on small islands across the Pacific that were held by the Japanese. The two large battles that occurred were the Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa. Iwo Jima occurred from February to March of 1945, and this is the one that has the famous picture of the soldiers holding up the flag on a hillside. And the Battle of Okinawa, this is a island that is south of, here's the main island of Japan, and Okinawa is south of here. Now, this was the bloodiest battle of the Pacific and the largest amphibious assault. When the American soldiers landed on Okinawa, they expected it to be tough fighting, and it was. The Americans were victorious here, and again, another really important strategic location for the Americans. In March of 1945, the U.S. began a firebombing campaign in Tokyo. Now, as you might recall, when I talked about the firebombing of Dresden, how firebombing works is bombs that are firebombs are dropped in a circular pattern across or around a city. And as the flames grow, they feed into one another and the material around them, and they grow into just this giant tornado, basically, of a flame. The firebombs of Tokyo killed between 80 to 100,000 people. We don't know the exact numbers. Sometimes these numbers are hard to get a pinpoint exactly. The people in Japan call the Night of Black Snow. That's what they use to refer to the firebombing of Tokyo. Now we move on to the atomic bombs. These were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. Now, I know that President Truman agonized greatly about whether to use these bombs, whose true power was really unknown. Let's take a look. This is a picture of one of the bombs exploding, and it's really quite a unemotional picture, right? It's quite detached. We don't really see the agony of the people that were below the bomb. And here is a picture of what happened to the landscape of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. As you can see, there is really nothing left there except for this very front of a building. I had a student visit a memorial at Hiroshima probably about 5 years ago, and she said it was still really quite barren, that nothing really was growing there. 70,000 people were killed immediately. 48,000 buildings were destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people would later die of radiation poisoning and cancer after the war. It was truly, truly devastating. Nagasaki was the bombing that occurred on August 9th of 1945. There are a lot of people that criticize the decision to drop another atomic bomb so close to the time of Hiroshima. So in this bombing, 40,000 were killed immediately, 60,000 were injured, and again, hundreds of thousands, we don't really know how many in the long run, died of radiation poisoning and cancer. There were people who survived. So if you think about the center of where the bomb dropped, those people were basically evaporated instantly. There are some places, and you're going to see this when you watch the atomic bomb reenactment in our next lesson. Some people, their shadows burned onto concrete, but they completely disintegrated. And the farther out you go, the more that you have scenes like this, where you have a person whose clothing basically melted into her skin, or the hair was lost due to the radiation poisoning. It was devastating. It was painful. It is hard to really understand or come to terms with what an awful situation that might have been. However, keep in mind the firebombing of Tokyo was just as destructive and just as deadly. Here is another picture of what happened during the atomic bomb. Again, the blast was so quick, and then it had shock waves that just went out from the center of the bomb, and it just fried some of its victims, as you can see in the picture on this slide. So we entered the nuclear age, and the next lesson will look at the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And again, this was not an easy decision for Truman, who was the president who made this decision to drop the atomic bombs. And it's something that I think will continue to be debated for a long time. Well, Act 8, the war ends. It's already ended in Europe, and finally it ends in the Pacific. Japan formally surrenders on September 2nd, 1945. You can see in this picture General Umeso. You can see the foreign minister, Mamoru Shigemitsu. And what's so interesting, I've seen live videos of this. They sit down at a table, American and Japanese representatives, and the Japanese signed a document of surrender. And it seems all so benign, so clean, so not warlike. However, it is a very somber moment because in the end, we have 70 million deaths or more from this war. Rebuilding begins across Europe and across Japan. The USA and the USSR emerge as superpowers, and the Cold War begins. This was a horrible, horrible war, the likes of which I hope we will never experience again across our world. We have other battles to fight, and surely there will be conflict that will continue. Surely there were good people and evil people on all sides of this war. The Allies and the Axis were enemies, but the people who lived within the zones of the Allies and the Axis were all people nonetheless, and some were very good and kind, and some did unspeakable acts of horror. So that is our lesson on World War II. The next couple days you'll spend looking at videos of the atomic bomb, as well as the number of nuclear weapons that are out there, and then you'll look at the death toll of World War II. Thank you for your attention through all of this. Goodbye.